We won't talk any more about that. The thing I want to move on to now and sort of edge towards the end of the show is David Unsworth has decided to move on. Well, he's decided, he's even been told. The club obviously say he's decided himself, and he's said himself that he's the one who's walked away. We'll get your views in a second about it. But to me, this has been quite a long time overdue. Not that I have any offence whatsoever or any feeling that's negative towards David Unsworth, because at the end of the day, I think he's one of the individuals at the football club who, if he's allowed to have his job, if he's been given a job to do, you know, at what point would you want to leave? At what point would you think that you weren't good enough at it? He wants to go there. He wants to do his best efforts at doing the job. And by and large, this is where the crux of the argument is. And this is where I'm really interested to get both your views. I'll start with you first, Pete. Basically, I look at the under-23s. I look at the academy. My opinion of them in any football club in the world is when you've got kids coming through to play professional football, 17, 18, even younger than that when you start, and of course, get into the under-23s. When I see my under-23 team, the first thing that I don't care about the most is the result of the game they're playing. And the reason that's the case is that team, that academy, and those games they play are there for those lads to express themselves. You look at Anthony Gordon, who's been one of our best this season, absolutely brilliant, and he's come through being at the academy for a few years. I don't want him coming off shrugging his shoulders for the under-23s because they've lost the game against anybody 1-0 and they've gone further down in the league table of the under-23s and the Premier League 2 or whatever they call it these days. When that happens, I don't give a shit. Yeah, it was great when it happened. I remember John Joe Kenny lifted the trophy when he won it. What did he win it? 2 out of 3 years? Absolutely fine. Really nice to see the lads do that at Goodison. Really nice. The bugbear I've got with that piece is that when they go and do that, I'm like, okay, how many of these lads that have just won that are going to be in this first team next season? What was it? 1, 2? Absolutely not. I'd rather we finish bottom, lose every single game, and we have an absolute starlet who's been ripping it apart. The rest of the team have been loads of crap, but this lad's going to come through and absolutely rip it for Everton in the Premier League.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the things I feel like we've lost sight of, you know, I'm not privy to all of the ongoings of Finch Farm, but the impression I've got is that we seem to have lost focus on what the actual end game is, what the goal is for the youth players. It's to get them into the first team at the end of the day. It's to develop players who are ready to play first team football. And obviously, not every player is going to come through and end up playing in the Premier League. But that's got to be the goal. Every single player who gets to the under-23 level has got to have some potential to be able to step up to the first team. And to do that, first and foremost, you've got to make sure that every team throughout the entire club is playing the same system. Because it just, you know, so that if there are injuries and the player is expected to step up, they can just slot straight into the first team.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously, you know, changes in managers probably haven't helped that. But that's what you've got a director of football for, surely. And the idea that we've gone so long, you know, down this process after Mashiri's come in, we've had Steve Walsh, we've had Marcel Brands, and now Kevin Thelwell looks like he's actually trying to get a grip of the whole thing. It's taken us this long to actually get any kind of structure in place, which actually seems to promote that end game of getting these young players up through the ranks and into that first team.
Les?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Pete said there. It's the sort of winning that Premier League 2. To be honest, just a little aside, my biggest bugbear with winning that was the fact that we lost against Liverpool when we lifted the trophy.
Well, see, you've just said that. Do you know what? I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that was another thing I wanted to put towards you was every single season when it happens throughout the year, and you sort of, a lot of people go along because we have the games up in Southport, don't we, and all that with the under-23s, under-18s and all that, and you're allowed to go and see them, whatnot. When I see those games, it's like, oh, it's Everton under-23 versus Liverpool under-23. Bragging rights, I hate that term anyway, but inverted commas, bragging rights. That's the only thing that concerns me about the results of a game for the under-23s. Look, fair play if those lads go and win those trophies. But if the lads go and win those trophies, then I'm looking at them thinking, half a dozen of these, best go and rip it apart and we win the Premier League next season. I know it doesn't happen in real terms, but in many ways, I'm thinking, why haven't we got most of these? You've got and ripped it apart against the likes of Chelsea, who are just absolute juggernauts when they've got hundreds of different types. The way in which it's been allowed is quite ridiculous, actually. Manchester City, similar. You know, you look at the way these clubs are ran and how they just seem to harvest young lads all over the country, all over the continent. They go out to different. It was Vitesse, isn't it? Who Chelsea tend to throw loads of their lads to. Seems completely wrong to me the way that's done. But Everton players beating them, great. So therefore, I'm thinking, hang on, if they've gone and done that against the best of the under-23s in the Premier League, why aren't half of these lads strolling straight in, like Pete just said then? And I think that's the other element of it, is having the same sort of structure in systems and tactics. Why can't they just go and stroll straight through? Or, like he said, in case of injuries, why can't those lads just go straight in and do a job for us? How often has it happened in recent years? The one that's always stuck in my head, I've mentioned this a few times, so I apologise already, but the point that I'm going to make, I think, is quite relevant in that what happened with Barkley. When Barkley came through straight into the first team, but then when Moyes, for whatever reason, decided that, okay, yeah, he's not quite ready for this, let's loan him out. Not a problem, loan him out. Who have you loaned him to? Oh, Leeds United, who Warnock won't give a game to straight away. Who have you loaned him to? Chef Wed, where he's played maybe 10 games. Give the loan to a side that are going to play the lad in the place you want to play them. That's why you've got academies. That's why you've got scouts. People who are able to say, I'd throw Ross Barkley, or more mad now, I'd throw a couple of the kids that are in under 23s to, I don't know, let's say, for instance, Nottingham Forest. They're playing exactly like we want Everton to play, or similar. Go and throw them there. And when they come back, they'll be absolutely ready to come straight onto our first team. To me, there's holes all over the place for that, Les. And that, to me, is now, Unsworth's gone, is the very prime thing we should be looking at doing, as well as bringing through someone else to run it.
Yeah, I think it's not just about bringing players through to the first team, the under-23s. It's about selling them on. It's about developing players.
That's exactly right, yeah.
And getting a good fee. I'm just looking at, players who left last season from the under-23s. We've got Beningame, went on a free. Pennington, who was 26.
So you've got who did you say that you've got? One who went to Hearts.
Beningame went to Hearts on a free. Pennington went on a free, but he was 26.
He's in Shrewsbury now, isn't he?
Yeah, season before that there was where's he gone? Kieran Dowell went for 2 million.
He played well against Burnley the other day, by the way.
Luke Garbutt on a free, 27. But there you go. But you look at you do look at players like Pennington and Garbutt. They shouldn't be anywhere near the 23s because they're really too old to be in the 23s. And if they've not made it at the club by that point, they should be moved on. But they're going on free transfers. Kieran Dowell was so well thought of and looked like he could be, although maybe a bit of a luxury player, he looked like he really could be a good player. And he has done well for Norwich. We got 1.98 million for him. Now, he's a player who's been in the first team a few times. He'd had a few games. And if you look, just always use the example of Liverpool, if you look at the players they sell, they've not been anywhere near the first team, and they're getting 5-6 million for them.
Yeah.
And
the great examples, the ones they threw over to, the ones they threw over to Bournemouth, Les.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. I mean,
Solanke.
If 15 million for Solanke isn't money laundering, I don't know what is. That's the thing. We're not getting sell-on for these players, are we? They're not making the first team. We're not getting any sell-on value. So it's not doing its job at all. Mick Greenall put an interesting thing up on Twitter before that Kevin Nicholson has come to the club. Now, if you've never heard of him, which I hadn't, his LinkedIn profile says he's a highly qualified and experienced UEFA Pro license holder. And one of his roles is helping to develop players, coaches, clubs and academies, focusing on optimizing talent development systems and player potential. So basically, we've got someone coming in to look at the whole academy system. Then you've got, is it Kevin Thelwell, who's the director of football now?
Yeah.
Him, who you like to think he must have had a big say in getting rid of Unsworth. It looks like there could possibly be a plan in place. Now, I don't want to take anything for granted, because and after all, and it could be ripped up within a matter of weeks or days. You just don't know. But they seem like two appointments who have come into the club, and Belwell looks like he's making changes already from a very, very stagnant under-23 setup. And if he's brought in Kevin Nicholson, who does that job of developing academies, that's got to be a plus point, hasn't it? But yeah, as I say, it's not been doing its job, so hopefully this is something changing now.
Well, let's hope so, but, it wouldn't surprise me if tomorrow we wake up and Alec Cleland's come in the cafe, or someone who used to get, the jobs for the boys type of thing, which I think that how many times have we said or seen that for quite some time now, jobs for the boys there. I don't want to go down this route again because there was much of a debate about Duncan Ferguson's role at the club, in inverted commas. He was associated with the academy for some time. I think the one that sort of sticks in my head a little bit, Pete, is when Joe Royle was head of the academy, and then what happened there seemed like such a strange situation, and we've had Joe with us on this show a few times, and it'd be interesting to get his thoughts on it. I might try and pick them actually at some point, but he moved over to Wigan and was heavily involved at Wigan, director of football wise and stuff like that. Look at what happened with Brands as well. We've got someone in there, if you've mentioned, I don't know if you've got any more insight on him than I have, because I've not seen much at all from him. I've seen him do is the traditional interview of welcome into the club and what he's done in various different faces and stuff like that. But what do you feel as towards this? Like, do you have to go and get somebody who knows what they're doing with this, who doesn't necessarily have the words Everton on their CV? I'm happy. In fact, in many ways, I'm happier to see that than somebody who has. And I'm not making a stereotype out of people who come to our club who've played for us before and whatnot, because yes, once upon a time we were a success, believe it or not, to people who are just listening to this. But what are your feelings towards this now? What direction you go down with this? And I thought what Les hinted, and both of you made an excellent point as well, about prioritising these players. If they're not there to get in the first team, sadly enough, the way the game is these days, they're here to make us money. That's be all and end all, and the sentiment has to go, as far as I'm concerned. Also, the other side of it, we've got catchment wise, we've got a really big area where there's loads and loads, hundreds of thousands of kids who love playing footy on Merseyside. I presume Liverpool's is in much better shape than ours is. And look where they are in the league. You know more about the women's game as well, Pete, in terms of they've just got promoted, haven't they, from the league below, where Everton are now in the WSL. Even that side of things on the women's game, which is obviously a completely different landscape to what the men's is right now. But what I'm saying is, catchment area wise, it's in high quality. It always has been, as far as we know. We all at some point played some level of footy. Some of us absolutely dreadful. Some of us much better. I'm not going to say who is, but look at him, Richard. Look at him there, off his cap there. But with those things happening, the way football is these days, women's and men's, these things are vital. They're so important. And I know basically we started this show by talking about the Premier League team, our team, Everton. Now they've got on. Yeah, are we going to stay up? Are we going to go down? That's the constant debate, because they're the team we pay to go and see. But they're just on the surface of things. They're like the iceberg, aren't you, that you see in the air? Everything below it is everything I think we get really, really poorly wrong. And I just want to get your take on how you go and solve this. You've seen it with the women's team, what you'd like to see with that. In many ways, there's a comparison with the men's as well, isn't it? The under-23s and all that. The Everton away from the first team have plenty of work to do.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, sentiment does go out the window. You've just got to go out and get the best possible people, the best available people for the roles throughout the club. If those people happen to be former Everton players, then great. But let's be honest, the sentiment does seem to go from top to bottom at Everton, and that goes for every level of the club. Sentiment has to go out of the window if you're going to run a successful business, which is exactly what Everton Football Club is. They need the best people in the best, in those top positions. And again, sometimes with sentiment, people can get hung up on, sort of not wanting to you know, get rid of players too early and all that sort of thing. You know, look at Matthew Pennington, for example. He was 26 when he left Everton, playing for the under-23s. Now, with all due respect to Matthew, you know, he's a top blue. He's a
derby.
Yeah, he did score in the derby. You're right. But even so, I mean, I think he was 19 when he scored in the derby, was he? 19 or 20? He didn't leave till 26. And I think we probably knew by the time he was 20, 21, he wasn't going to make it, you know, at Everton in the Premier League, whether that was to do with, you know, other players who were there at the time or just, you know,
Conor McAleny as well. Do you remember him? He was there too, wasn't he?
Yeah, we loaned him out about 10 times, didn't we? And you know, he seemed to sort of go away, score a few goals, get injured, come back. And then Luke Garbutt was another one. You know, he was there forever. I think we gave him a £30,000 a week contract, 5-year contract, which he just saw out in the end because I think there was interest from other clubs. But we do have to be more ruthless, and we have to, you know, we have to move these kids on. It's you've got to be more brutal in sport. You know, at the end of the day, make sure that they get the right aftercare, and make sure we do our best to give them, you know, whatever help they need. But at the same time, if a player's not good enough, you know, by the time they get to 19, 20, 21, they're never going to be good enough to play in the Premier League, in my opinion. Certainly not unless they're playing first team football, or playing around first team players. Talking, you know, going back to your point about Ross Barkley as well, about him going out on loan. If you get the training ground right, there isn't necessarily even a reason for players to go out on loan. And the example I'll use for that, and obviously it's on a different level to us, but Manchester City, I remember Pep Guardiola talking about Phil Foden after he'd made his debut for Man City, and there was talk of him going out on loan. And Guardiola basically said, I don't want him to go anywhere else. He said, there's nothing he can learn playing football in the Championship that he can't learn playing with these players every day. He said he'd learn more in training, you know, under the coaching of Guardiola and his team than he would going and playing in the Championship. And it goes back to, if your coaching's right, if the setup's right, if there's a clear path to the first team, then you can develop these players yourself. Yeah, some of them can go out on loan if needs be, but you know, it's got to start at home. The coaching, the training, the intensity of the training, everything. It's got to mirror the first team, in my opinion. You've got to get everything spot on. You know, sort of hate to bring them up. The other lot across the park, when we played them in the FA Cup a few seasons ago, and they played a load of their kids, they played the exact same system against us. And although we did actually deserve to win that game, we did. We created that many chances. You could still see that the style of play and the system that they play was exactly the same as their first team played. And it's no coincidence now that a number of those players are now actually stepping up into the first team and slotting straight in. That's what we need to have. We need to have that. We need to have that structure, and we need to make sure that the people throughout the club are the best people for the job, regardless of who they've played for, or you know, whether they made a substitute appearance for Everton back in 1987.
Yeah, spot on, mate. We'll leave it there. That's almost a full hour of Subs Weekly here. Hope you've enjoyed it. Let us know. Tweet us, get in touch. You can message us on your Patreon account as well. We've got bagfuls coming up with the rest of the week, previews towards next week's game against Leicester. And we'll generally talk about all of the news and things that'll be going on with Everton this week, if there's any movement towards what happens in David Unsworth leaving the football club. It remains to be seen. But yeah, thanks for listening. Do drop us a tweet if you want to. It's at the Blue Doom EFC. I'm sure you know that by now. And we'll be back pretty soon. Thanks everyone for listening.